He saved an Apache woman in the forest and woke up with a mark no one dares ignore. Ever since he was a boy, he felt a strange connection with the tall trees, the soft moss underfoot, and the crisp air that carried the scent of pine and wet earth. While other kids in his town preferred video games or busy streets, John found peace in wandering the mountains, listening to birds and the gentle rush of streams. The forest was more than a place for him. It was a world of adventure, mystery, and discovery. Every rock, every fallen branch, every hidden path felt alive, as if it had a story to tell. One chilly morning, John woke up earlier than usual. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. He packed a small backpack, a water bottle, some sandwiches, a first aid kit, and his notebook where he liked to record the plants and animals he saw. He also carried a small camera, always ready to capture something remarkable. Today, he decided to explore a trail he had never taken before, a narrow path that wound deeper into the forest than he had ever gone. The trail was rumored to lead to a hidden waterfall, and the idea of discovering it excited him. As he walked, the forest seemed quiet in a different way. The usual rustle of squirrels or the distant call of birds was replaced by a heavy stillness. John noticed footprints in the dirt, some faint, some fresh. They didn't look like deer or any animal he knew. Curiosity pulled him forward and he followed them carefully, paying attention to the direction and size of each step. Soon, he realized that the footprints were human. They were small, delicate, and hurried. Something about them made John's heart beat faster, not with fear but with concern. The path grew steeper and the trees older. Their roots twisted out of the ground like giant snakes, and moss clung to the trunks in thick green layers. Sunlight barely touched the forest floor here, making the shadows long and mysterious. John moved slowly, careful not to make noise, listening for any sound. And then he heard it, a soft, shaky cry coming from somewhere ahead. He froze, trying to locate the source. The sound came again, weak but desperate. Without thinking, he ran toward it, pushing through branches and ferns. There, in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines, he saw her. A young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, was sitting on the ground, clutching her leg. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and her hair, black and shiny, was tangled with leaves. Her face showed pain, fear, and exhaustion. She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Are you okay?" John asked gently, approaching slowly so as not to scare her further. She shook her head, unable to speak clearly at first. Her lips quivered, and tears ran down her cheeks. John knelt beside her and examined her leg. There was a deep cut just above her ankle, and it was bleeding steadily. He pulled out his first aid kit and began cleaning the wound as carefully as he could, using antiseptic and bandages. "I'm Aeon," she finally whispered. I got lost." John nodded. "It's okay, Aeon, you're safe now. We'll get you out of here." She flinched slightly at the word safe, as if the forest had taught her not to trust anyone too easily. John could sense her hesitation and tried to calm her with his tone. "I know it's scary, but I promise I won't let anything happen to you. Can you stand?" With a little effort and John's support, she managed to rise. Her steps were shaky, but she leaned on him as they began moving along a safer path. The forest around them seemed to watch silently, shadows shifting as the wind whispered through the leaves. John noticed that she moved with a careful grace, like someone used to navigating rough terrain, but clearly she hadn't been prepared for being alone for so long. As they walked, John tried to make conversation to distract her from the pain. "How long have you been here?" he asked gently. Aeon hesitated, then said, "A few days, I think. I lost my group while we were traveling. I didn't know where to go." John's mind raced. "Traveling? You mean hiking?" She shook her head. "No, it's different. My people, we were doing something important, a journey." Her words trailed off. John didn't press further. He could sense that it was personal, and perhaps not something she could explain easily. The forest path narrowed as they climbed higher. Small streams crossed their way, and fallen branches made the footing tricky. John held her hand when needed, guiding her carefully, and she slowly began to trust him. It wasn't just about saving her from the forest. It was about making her feel safe in a world that had suddenly turned frightening and unfamiliar. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the forest floor. John decided they needed to find shelter before it got dark. He knew of a small cabin he had used before, abandoned but safe. He told Aeon about it, and together they made their way, both tired but determined. Along the way, John noticed more signs of the forest's life. A fox darting between trees, birds settling in for the night, and even the distant roar of a waterfall, which gave him hope that they were heading in the right direction. Finally, they reached the cabin. John opened the door and let Aeon inside. The small space was dusty but dry. There was an old fireplace, a wooden table, and a few shelves that had survived years of neglect. John lit a small fire, the warmth filling the room and pushing away the chill of the forest. Aeon sank onto an old chair, finally allowing herself to rest. "You're safe now," John said softly, handing her some water. She took it gratefully, her hands trembling slightly. John watched her, realizing that the forest, which he had loved for so long, had now become a place of destiny, where his path had crossed with hers, changing both their lives forever. He didn't know yet how extraordinary this meeting would be. At that moment, it was just a quiet evening, the fire crackling, the forest standing silently outside. But the encounter would mark the beginning of something beyond the ordinary, a connection, a mystery, and a responsibility neither of them could have imagined. John stayed nearby, keeping watch, listening to the sounds of the night. Somewhere deep in the forest, life continued as usual, but in this small cabin, something new had begun. It was the start of a journey, not just through the forest, but into a world of courage, compassion, and unforeseen consequences. And though he didn't realize it yet, that night would become unforgettable, not just for him, but for the stranger he had saved, and for the forest itself, which seemed to hum with approval of his actions. By the time sleep finally overcame him, John felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. He had ventured into the forest seeking adventure, and instead had found responsibility, trust, and a bond that would not be easily broken. Little did he know that what awaited him in the coming days would be more incredible and mysterious than he could ever imagine. John woke up early the next morning to the soft light filtering through the cabin's small window. The forest outside was alive with the sounds of birds, rustling leaves, and the distant murmur of a stream. As he stretched and rubbed the sleep from his eyes, he noticed Aeon sitting quietly by the fire, her eyes staring at the flames. She seemed calm, but John could see the pain still lingered on her face. Her leg, though bandaged, was sore, and every movement made her wince slightly. "Good morning," John said softly, trying not to startle her. Aeon looked up and gave a small nod, offering a faint smile. She didn't speak immediately, as if gathering her thoughts. John understood that she might be tired both physically and emotionally. Being lost in the forest for days could break anyone's spirit, and yet here she was, still standing. He admired her quiet strength. After a few moments of silence, John asked, "Can you tell me more about what happened yesterday? How did you get lost?" Aeon hesitated. Her eyes fell to the floor and she took a deep breath. My people were traveling through the forest. It's a sacred journey we take sometimes. I wasn't supposed to leave, but I got separated. I tried to find the group, but the forest is vast and confusing. I didn't know which way to go." John listened carefully, sensing the weight of her words. He had always thought of the forest as a place of beauty and adventure, but for her, it was a challenge filled with danger and responsibility. "I'm glad you found me," he said. "I wouldn't have left you alone out here." Aeon's eyes softened slightly and she nodded. "Thank you." You didn't have to help me. Most people wouldn't have stopped." John shrugged. I couldn't just leave you, it's not right. Besides, I felt I should. He tried to keep his tone casual, but inside he felt a strange sense of purpose. Something about helping her felt important, almost like fate had led him to this moment. After breakfast, John suggested they take a short walk to stretch Aeon's legs and make sure the forest around the cabin was safe. The sunlight filtered through the trees, creating patterns of gold and green on the forest floor. Every step was careful, with John supporting Aeon when the terrain grew uneven. She moved slowly but steadily, showing him that even in her weakened state, she had remarkable resilience. As they walked, John noticed small details he had never paid attention to before. The way certain plants grew only in shaded areas, the sound of water trickling over rocks, and the scent of wildflowers mixed with pine. He pointed these out to Aeon, who smiled faintly. "You know a lot about the forest," she said. "I've spent most of my life here," John replied. "It feels peaceful, like it's a part of me." Aeon nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "The forest is sacred to my people. It teaches us many things, but it can be unforgiving if you're not careful. You are lucky to know it so well." John felt a mix of pride and humility. He had always loved the forest, but he had never thought of it as sacred. Now, listening to Aeon, he realized there was more to it than just trees and animals. There was history, tradition, and even something spiritual that connected the land to those who respected it. As the day went on, John and Aeon grew more comfortable with each other. He learned that she was part of a small Apache community that lived near the mountains, preserving their traditions and way of life. They had been on a journey through the forest to honor their ancestors, a practice she described with reverence and care. She spoke of ceremonies, songs, and rituals, but always with a humility that made John feel he was hearing something sacred. In turn, John shared stories of his childhood, his adventures in the forest, and his love for nature. He told her about the hidden waterfall he had been seeking and the animals he had spotted over the years. Aeon listened quietly, her eyes sometimes sparkling with amusement or curiosity. Even though their worlds were different, John felt a connection forming, a bridge between his ordinary life and the extraordinary one she represented. By late afternoon, they returned to the cabin. Aeon's leg had grown tired from walking, and she settled near the fire again. John prepared a simple meal, and they ate in comfortable silence, the warmth of the fire and the smell of cooking filling the room. For a moment, the forest outside seemed far away, and all that mattered was the quiet companionship they shared. As evening approached, John decided it was time to check on her wound again. He cleaned and rebandaged it carefully, making sure she was comfortable. Aeon watched him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You are very kind," she said softly. John smiled. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." But inside, he knew it was more than that. Helping her felt right in a way he couldn't explain. It wasn't just about saving someone. It was about protecting something precious, something that mattered beyond himself. That night, as they prepared to sleep, Aeon asked John if he would sit with her by the fire for a while. "I feel safer with someone nearby," she admitted. John agreed, and they spent the evening talking quietly, sharing small stories and observations about the forest. He noticed how her eyes seemed to reflect the flickering flames, and how even in her exhaustion there was a quiet strength that impressed him deeply. At one point, Aeon fell silent, her gaze distant. "The forest, it watches," she said softly. "It knows who belongs and who does not. I think it wanted you to find me." John frowned slightly, unsure what she meant. "What do you mean?" Aeon looked at him seriously. "Some things in this forest are not just natural. They are alive in a way that humans don't always understand. You saved me, and perhaps the forest recognized it. Perhaps that is why you were here." John nodded slowly, feeling a chill of awe and uncertainty. He had never believed in anything supernatural, yet there was something in her words, and in the quiet energy of the forest, that made him wonder if she was right. Before going to sleep, John checked on Aeon one last time. She was settled in a corner of the cabin, wrapped in a blanket, her breathing steady. He looked out the window at the moon rising above the trees, its light casting silver patterns across the forest floor. The forest felt alive, almost as if it were aware of him, watching him. John lay down near the fire, unable to shake a feeling of anticipation. He had come to the forest seeking adventure, but he had found something else entirely: responsibility, trust, and a connection that seemed bigger than himself. He didn't know what the coming days would bring, but he felt certain that this encounter with Aeon was just the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever. As he drifted into sleep, the firelight dimmed, and the forest outside hummed with quiet life. Somewhere deep among the trees, the stream continued its endless flow, birds settled into their nests, and the wind whispered secrets through the leaves. John dreamed, unaware of how closely his fate was now intertwined with Aeon's and with the forest that had brought them together. The night passed peacefully, but the memory of the day, the fear, the hope, and the small victories stayed with him. John had saved someone in need, but he also began to realize that saving her might be the first step in a much larger story, one that would test courage, compassion, and understanding in ways he had never imagined. And so, in the quiet solitude of the forest cabin, a bond began to form between two strangers, one from the ordinary world and one carrying the legacy of her people. A bond that would grow stronger with each passing day, leading to mysteries, revelations, and challenges that neither of them could foresee. John closed his eyes, feeling both exhaustion and excitement. He had always loved the forest, but now it had become a place of destiny, a living world full of hidden meaning, and he was no longer just a visitor. He was part of something bigger, and the adventure was only beginning. The next evening, a quiet tension filled the small cabin. John had spent the day helping Aeon regain her strength, gathering water from a nearby stream, and checking the small garden of herbs he sometimes used for basic remedies. Aeon, despite her injury, insisted on moving slowly and exploring the edge of the cabin, curious about everything John had collected over time. She seemed fascinated by the small items he kept, a journal full of sketches, a worn compass, and little wooden carvings he had made over the years. "Why do you keep these things?" she asked, pointing to the carvings. John smiled. "I like to remember the little details of life. Things that might seem small but are important. Nature, people, moments, they all tell a story." Aeon nodded thoughtfully. "In my culture, we also keep reminders, symbols that guide us, show us the path we are meant to follow. Perhaps that is why the forest led me to you. There is a reason beyond chance." John listened, intrigued by her words. The air in the cabin seemed heavier with meaning, and he felt a strange curiosity growing inside him. He had always believed the forest was beautiful, but now he began to sense something deeper, a quiet intelligence in the way the trees stood, the wind whispered, and the night seemed alive with unseen eyes. As night fell, the sky outside turned dark, dotted with stars. The moon cast a silver glow over the cabin, illuminating the small clearing around it. John stoked the fire, watching the flames dance and listening to the forest sounds, the rustling leaves, the occasional call of an owl, and the soft murmur of the stream. Aeon sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You should rest," John said gently. "You've had a long day and your leg needs time to heal." I cannot sleep easily," Aeon admitted. "Not when I feel the forest watching." "It is not harmful, but it is aware." John frowned slightly, unsure what she meant. "The forest, aware? How do you mean?" She looked at him seriously. "Some places are alive in ways humans rarely understand. They notice courage, kindness, and actions that honor life. I believe the forest noticed what you did yesterday. It saw you save me." John felt a chill, part curiosity and part disbelief. He had always been logical, trusting only what he could see and touch. Yet her words stirred something inside him, a feeling that went beyond explanation. "And what does that mean?" he asked cautiously. Aeon paused, then said softly, "Sometimes, when someone acts with true heart, the forest leaves a mark, a sign that cannot be ignored." John laughed lightly, unsure if she was joking. "A mark, like a tattoo?" Aeon shook her head, serious. "Not like any ordinary mark, something more, a sign that changes you. It is rare, but it happens, and I think it may happen to you." John didn't respond. He felt a strange tension in his chest, an odd warmth that seemed to grow as the words sank in. He tried to brush it off, telling himself it was just fatigue and imagination, but deep down, a part of him could not ignore the feeling that something unusual was about to happen. Later, as the cabin grew darker and the firelight flickered, John lay down on a simple mat near the fireplace. He could hear Aeon's soft breathing as she rested nearby. Closing his eyes, he tried to relax, but sleep did not come easily. His mind wandered to the forest, to the strange energy he felt around them, and to Aeon herself, her quiet strength, her calmness, and the mystery that seemed to follow her. It was then that the dream began. At first, it was faint, a shimmer of light at the edge of his vision. Then slowly, a pattern formed in his chest, glowing softly beneath his skin. Warmth spread from the center outward, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. The light was neither frightening nor painful, but it was powerful, almost alive. Shapes began to take form, a symbol that seemed familiar yet unknown. He tried to touch it in the dream, but his hand passed through as if it were part of the air itself. Aeon appeared in the dream, standing in a small clearing surrounded by silver light. Her eyes were calm, yet filled with meaning. She did not speak, but John understood that the light, the warmth, and the symbol were connected to the act of saving her. He felt a strange sense of responsibility, as if the forest itself had chosen him for something greater than he could comprehend. When he awoke, the first thing he noticed was the warmth in his chest. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, and that's when he saw it, the mark. A faint glowing symbol rested on his chest, just above his heart. It was not large, but it was impossible to ignore. Its shape was intricate, flowing like a combination of natural patterns and geometric design. It seemed to pulse gently, as if alive. John froze, staring at the mark. How could this be? He had never seen anything like it in his life. It was not a tattoo, not paint, not anything that could be applied by human hands. It was something else entirely. Aeon, who had been awake and watching him, gasped softly. "It has appeared," she whispered. Her voice was filled with awe and caution. "The forest, it has recognized your action. This mark, it is a sign of protection, courage, and responsibility. You have been chosen." John looked at her in disbelief. "Chosen? Chosen for what?" Aeon shook her head gently. "I do not know all of it, but I know this. The mark is not just a symbol. It carries meaning. It means you have been entrusted with something important. It is rare for anyone to receive such a sign. Most people never see it in their lifetime. And now it is a part of you." John's mind raced. How could saving someone in the forest lead to something like this? Was it coincidence, chance, or something beyond understanding? The warmth from the mark spread through him again, and he felt a strange calmness, as if the forest itself were reassuring him. He looked at Aeon. "What will happen now?" she sighed softly. "Now we wait and we learn. The forest has a way of guiding those who carry the mark. It will test you, teach you, and show you things you never imagined. But you must be patient and you must respect it." John nodded slowly, still trying to process everything. Part of him wanted to dismiss it as a dream, a trick of fatigue, but the mark was real, undeniable. He could feel it, see it faintly glowing in the dim morning light, and it filled him with a sense of awe he could not shake. For the rest of the morning, John and Aeon moved carefully around the cabin. The air seemed different now, charged with a quiet energy. Birds sang with unusual clarity, and the light through the trees shimmered in a way that caught the corner of John's eyes. He felt a new connection to the forest, deeper than anything he had known before. Every sound, every movement seemed significant, as if the world were speaking to him in a language he had only just begun to understand. Aeon taught him small rituals of respect to the forest. She showed him how to walk quietly, notice patterns in the leaves, and honor the life around them. She did not explain everything, only enough for John to begin understanding. "The forest teaches those who listen," she said. "And now it has chosen you to listen more closely than most." John spent the day learning, observing, and reflecting. He began to see the forest differently, not just as a place for adventure, but as a living, breathing entity with rules, wisdom, and mysteries. And all the while, the mark on his chest reminded him that his life had changed in ways he could not yet fully comprehend. By evening, John felt exhausted but enlightened. The strange events of the night had left him both awed and nervous. He had saved Aeon, yes, but the forest had responded in a way he never expected. The mark was a sign, a responsibility, and a mystery all at once. And while he did not yet know what it meant fully, he understood one thing clearly: his life, and perhaps the world he knew, would never be the same again. As night fell, John lay near the fire, staring at the flickering flames. Aeon rested nearby, quiet and peaceful, her presence reassuring. The forest hummed outside, alive with unseen movement. And for the first time, John realized that the forest had chosen him, not by chance, but by recognizing his courage, his compassion, and his heart. The mark was real. The forest was watching. And John's journey into the unknown was just beginning. The morning after the strange night, John awoke with the same faint warmth in his chest, the mark on his skin now slightly more visible, yet still glowing softly as if alive. The fire had burned low, leaving a gentle ember glow in the cabin, and the forest outside seemed unusually calm. Birds chirped with delicate clarity, and a soft wind rustled the leaves, carrying with it the earthy scent of pine and damp soil. John sat quietly for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened. The mark, the dream, Aeon's words, everything seemed surreal yet undeniable. Aeon was already awake, sitting cross-legged near the window, her gaze fixed on the distant trees. When she noticed John stirring, she smiled faintly. "You sleep well?" she asked. John nodded slowly. "I think so, but last night was strange. The mark, the dream. I still don't understand what is happening." Aeon's expression softened almost tenderly. "It is not strange in the way you think. It is natural for those the forest chooses, but understanding comes slowly. You must learn patience and awareness." John rubbed his eyes, trying to make sense of her words. "Chosen by the forest, but why me? I'm just me. I wasn't doing anything special." Aeon looked at him seriously. "You acted with courage and kindness without thinking of reward. That is enough. Many people live their lives without ever seeing or feeling the forest respond. You did, and now you carry its sign. That mark, it is both a blessing and a responsibility." John stared at her, feeling the weight of her words. He had always thought of himself as an ordinary man, someone who loved nature and adventure. But now, with the glowing mark on his chest and Aeon's calm certainty, he realized that ordinary actions could lead to extraordinary consequences. He had saved someone in need, yet the forest had responded in a way he had never imagined. Throughout the morning, Aeon guided John to explore the surroundings carefully, showing him subtle signs in the forest that most people would miss. The patterns of leaves on the ground, the paths animals used, and small symbols carved into tree bark by travelers long before. She explained that the forest itself was alive with awareness, responding to actions of courage, respect, and honesty. John felt a deep sense of wonder, realizing that the world he thought he knew had layers he had never noticed before. As they walked along a small path, Aeon spoke about her people's traditions. "Our journeys in the forest are not just about moving from one place to another," she said. "They are lessons. They teach patience, respect, and the understanding of life that is not written in books. The forest shows who is ready to carry wisdom and who is not." John listened intently. "And the mark, it's like a sign that I am ready," Aeon nodded slowly. "Yes, it is a symbol of protection and responsibility. It is rare for anyone to receive it. When the forest chooses, it watches, it tests, and it marks those who are worthy. But the mark is only the beginning. You must live with it, learn from it, and act according to its guidance." John felt both awe and uncertainty. He had never imagined that an act of helping someone could lead to such profound consequences. The mark was not just a symbol, it was a call, a responsibility he could not ignore. He looked at Aeon, feeling both admiration and curiosity. "What kind of guidance? What am I supposed to do?" Aeon's eyes softened, but she did not give a direct answer. "The forest will guide you in time. First, you must understand it, respect it, and carry its lessons into your life. The mark is a reminder that courage and kindness are noticed, even when no one else sees them." Over the next few days, John began to notice subtle changes in himself. He became more aware of sounds, smells, and movements in the forest. The animals seemed less cautious around him, and paths that were difficult to navigate before now felt easier, as if the forest itself was helping him. He realized that the mark was not just a sign, it was a connection. A bridge between him and the world around him, giving him a deeper understanding of life in its smallest details. Aeon encouraged him to practice mindfulness, teaching him to observe the forest without interfering, to notice patterns, and to move with care and respect. She explained that the mark was not meant to make him powerful, but to make him aware, responsible, and compassionate. Every step he took, every action he performed would now carry weight in ways he had never considered. One afternoon, they came across a small stream that flowed gently through the forest. The water was clear, reflecting the sunlight like a mirror. Aeon knelt by the bank, touching the water lightly. "The forest shows balance in all things," she said. "Every drop of water, every stone, every living creature has its purpose. To carry the mark is to see this balance, to act without harming it." John knelt beside her, letting the cool water run over his hands. The sensation was refreshing, yet it also filled him with a sense of responsibility he could not ignore. "It's like the forest is alive," he said quietly, "watching everything, noticing everything." Aeon smiled. "It is alive, not like a person, but in its own way it knows. And it trusts you now. That trust must not be broken." The following days were filled with quiet lessons and reflection. John learned to notice small details he had ignored before: the tracks of animals, the growth of plants, the subtle changes in wind and temperature. He began to understand that the forest was not just a place of beauty, but a living entity that rewarded respect and courage. At night, the mark on his chest continued to glow faintly, a constant reminder of his responsibility. Aeon explained that the glow would fade and brighten depending on his actions and awareness. It was not meant to scare him or control him, but to guide him. The mark was a tool, a message, and a promise all at once. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with shades of orange and purple, John and Aeon sat by the fire outside the cabin. The forest was quiet, almost reverent, and the air felt electric with meaning. John touched the mark gently, feeling the faint warmth pulsing beneath his fingers. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he admitted softly. Aeon placed a hand on his arm, reassuringly. "No one is ready at first, but courage is not about being ready. It is about acting when you must, even when you are unsure. You have already shown that courage. That is why the forest chose you." John nodded, absorbing her words. The weight of the mark felt heavy, yet not burdensome. It was a responsibility, yes, but also an honor. He realized that he could not ignore what had happened, nor could he pretend it was just a strange event. The forest, Aeon and the mark had changed him in ways he could not reverse. Over the next week, John began to feel the effects of the mark in subtle ways. He noticed that animals approached him without fear, that paths seemed easier to follow, and that his senses were sharper. He could feel changes in the weather, shifts in the forest's energy, and even the emotions of those around him more clearly. The mark had connected him to something bigger, a network of life and energy he had never recognized before. Aeon explained that the forest did not mark everyone, and not everyone could understand or carry its lessons. Those who were chosen were tested not through danger or fear, but through awareness, responsibility, and compassion. "You are now part of a story that began long before you," she said, "and it will continue long after. What you do now matters." John reflected on her words, realizing how small his life had seemed before, and how much larger the world truly was. The forest, once a place of personal adventure, was now a living entity with wisdom and purpose, and he, an ordinary man, had become part of it. By the end of the week, John had accepted the mark as a permanent part of his life. He had learned to move with awareness, to act with responsibility, and to respect the forest in ways he had never imagined. The glowing symbol on his chest was no longer just mysterious. It was a guide, a reminder, and a connection to a world beyond ordinary understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned deep blue, John looked at the mark once more. He could feel its warmth, its pulse, and its quiet strength. He knew that his life would never be the same again, and that the journey he had begun with Aeon was far from over. The forest had chosen him. The mark had shown him his path. And John was ready to step into the responsibility and adventure that lay ahead, guided by courage, compassion, and the unseen wisdom of the world around him. Days passed, and John's life began to change in ways he had never imagined. The mark on his chest pulsed gently, a constant reminder of the responsibility the forest had placed upon him. Aeon remained his guide, teaching him more about the forest, its secrets, and the traditions of her people. With each lesson, John's understanding grew, and so did his connection with the natural world around him. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy as John and Aeon set out on another walk. The forest seemed to recognize him now, as if it had accepted him fully. Birds flew closer than before, small animals observed him curiously, and the air felt alive with energy. Every step he took felt deliberate, careful, and purposeful. He understood that the mark was not merely a symbol, it was a responsibility that demanded awareness, respect, and action. Aeon spoke softly as they walked. "You see, John, the forest is like a living story. Every tree, every stream, every animal is a word, a sentence, a paragraph. The mark allows you to read this story in a way most people cannot. It gives you understanding, but it also requires wisdom. You must act with care and integrity." John nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand, Aeon. I will do my best. I don't know everything yet, but I want to learn and respect it. I want to be worthy of this gift." Aeon smiled faintly. "That is all the forest asks. You cannot rush understanding. You must experience, observe, and act thoughtfully. Only then will the meaning of the mark fully reveal itself." Over the next few weeks, John continued his training and learning. He learned to notice the smallest details, the way the wind shifted the leaves, the subtle tracks of animals hidden beneath moss, and even the rhythm of the stream as it wound through the trees. Each detail taught him patience and observation. He discovered that the forest had its own language, communicated through movement, sound, and signs, and that the mark allowed him to sense it more deeply. Aeon also taught him about the history of her people, how they had lived in harmony with the forest for generations. She told stories of courage, sacrifice, and respect for life. John listened, fascinated, realizing that the lessons of the forest were not just about survival. They were about understanding one's place in the world and the impact of every choice. One day, while exploring a hidden valley, John and Aeon discovered a small grove with ancient trees, their trunks thick and twisted with age. The sunlight filtered through the canopy, creating patterns on the forest floor that seemed almost magical. Aeon explained that this grove was sacred, a place where her people had prayed, celebrated, and honored the forest for centuries. John approached one of the oldest trees, feeling a deep connection to it. The mark on his chest pulsed gently, as if responding to the energy of the grove. He realized that his actions, his presence, and his respect were all part of a larger balance. The forest was alive, aware, and responsive, and he now was a part of it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson, Aeon turned to John. "Do you feel it?" she asked. John nodded slowly. "Yes, I feel connected. I understand now that this mark is not just a sign. It is a guide, a reminder, and a responsibility. I can't ignore it, and I don't want to." Aeon smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "You are ready, John. You have learned patience, awareness, and respect. You have listened to the forest and acted with courage. The mark has chosen you for this path, and now it is time to embrace it fully." That evening, as they returned to the cabin, John reflected on how much his life had changed. The forest, once a place of adventure, had become a living teacher. Aeon, once a stranger, had become a mentor and friend. And the mark, once mysterious and frightening, had become a part of him, a guide that would shape his actions, choices, and understanding forever. Over time, John began to share his knowledge and experience with others, carefully and respectfully. He helped guide travelers through safe paths in the forest, taught them to notice the small details of nature, and shared stories of courage and respect inspired by Aeon's teachings. People who saw the faint glow of the mark on his chest often asked about it, some with curiosity, some with awe. John would smile and explain gently, "It is a reminder to respect life, to act with kindness, and to listen to the world around you. That is all you need to know." The forest itself seemed to respond. Animals grew accustomed to his presence, streams flowed more clearly, and even the weather seemed to cooperate with careful observation and respect. John realized that the mark was not a burden, it was a tool, a connection to something larger than himself, and a constant guide in his actions. Years passed, and John's understanding of the forest deepened. He discovered hidden groves, secret waterfalls, and paths that few had ever seen. He learned to read the signs of nature, predicting changes in weather, noticing shifts in animal behavior, and understanding the delicate balance of life in the forest. The mark remained on his chest, always present, always pulsing with quiet energy, a constant reminder of the responsibility he had accepted. Aeon continued to guide him, though she gradually allowed him more independence. She trusted him to make decisions, to act wisely, and to carry the lessons of the forest into the world beyond. Their bond grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. John realized that saving Aeon in the forest had been the first step in a journey that had changed not only his life, but the way he understood the world around him. One evening, as they sat by a quiet stream, Aeon spoke softly. "John, you have done more than just carry the mark. You have embraced its meaning. You have shown courage, respect, and understanding. The forest recognizes that, and it will continue to guide you as long as you listen." John looked at her, feeling gratitude and humility. "I could not have done it without your guidance, Aeon. You taught me to see, to respect, and to understand. I will continue to honor that." Aeon smiled. "And that is all the forest asks." As the sun set, casting long shadows across the water, John felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and mystery, yet he had grown stronger, wiser, and more aware. The mark on his chest was no longer just a symbol, it was a living part of him, guiding his thoughts, actions, and understanding. It reminded him that courage and kindness, even in small acts, could change lives in ways he had never imagined. Years later, people would come to know John as the guardian of the forest, a man with a faint glowing mark on his chest and a quiet wisdom in his eyes. Travelers respected him, animals trusted him, and the forest seemed to welcome his presence. He had become a bridge between worlds, the ordinary and the extraordinary, the seen and the unseen. Yet John never forgot the first day he found Aeon in the forest, her fear and exhaustion, and the moment he decided to help her. That act of courage, simple as it seemed, had set in motion a journey that had reshaped his life. The mark had appeared not as a reward but as a guide. It had connected him to the forest, to Aeon, and to a deeper understanding of life itself. Even in quiet moments, when the forest was calm and the world seemed ordinary, John felt the pulse of the mark beneath his skin. It reminded him that responsibility, courage, and respect were never-ending lessons. Every day offered new opportunities to act wisely, to honor life, and to walk carefully through the world. And so, John embraced his life fully, carrying the mark with pride, humility, and understanding. The forest had chosen him, Aeon had guided him, and together they had discovered that courage, kindness, and respect could create bonds and awaken mysteries far greater than one could imagine. The mark was no longer a mystery. It was a part of him, a symbol of his journey, and a reminder that true courage and compassion are always recognized, even when no one else notices. It was a guide for life, a connection to the world, and a testament to the extraordinary power of ordinary acts. In the end, John understood that saving Aeon in the forest was only the beginning. The real journey was the one he now walked every day, listening, learning, and living in harmony with the forest, carrying the mark that no one dared ignore, and honoring the responsibility it represented.